Good morning, everyone. This is Paul Hardy from Ironside. Welcome to another edition of our Take30 with a data advisor, which we hold on Wednesday afternoons or Wednesday mornings at 11 o'clock. So we're glad to have you here. For those of you that were with us yesterday, Pam Askar, my colleague, did a session related to higher education and AI use cases in higher education. And she mentioned data strategy and roadmap case study that we had done with Northeastern Universities. Well, today we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about data strategy in higher education and use a Northeastern University case study to discuss that in detail. There's a lot of material here, and I'm going to really try to fly through it, but I'm very thrilled to let you know that also on the line with us is Rana Glasgow. Now, Rana was quoted yesterday by Pam. Rana was unable to attend yesterday, but she managed to clear her schedule and is with us today. So Rana will be available for any Q&A that you may have. As you can see, she's the Associate Vice Provost for Institutional Research and Development at Northeastern. She was our leading project leader, and her organization was one of our project sponsors, along with the IT organization, the CIO himself. So Rana, thank you for being here. We appreciate it. And if anyone has questions, please feel free to ask them. We do have a Q&A session at the end. But if they're biting and Rana can help, or I can help, please let us know. Or you can enter them into the chat box. Obviously, we can get to them at the end, or Debbie can tell us about those as we're going forward here. Great, so quickly, Ironside, if you've been on our Take30s, you know we help our clients use data to make better decisions about their business, a simple mission which we like. And a little bit about Ironside in terms of our capabilities. We've been providing end-to-end data and analytics value for 20 years, and this is a picture of our end-to-end. So I run our advisory practice that you see starting in the upper right-hand corner, but what you can see then is an end-to-end journey where we go from advising our clients around strategy to actually building solutions. We design, build, and deploy those solutions. We also focused on how to govern the solutions that we create, and ultimately we do have managed services as well, where we can actually take the management over of some of those services for our clients. So I will move on from that in the interest of time. So we're going to talk today about data strategy, and we're going to talk about the Northeastern University case study. So a little bit of the background on Northeastern. You can see some of the statistics here. What Northeastern is well known for, besides being number 40 in the U.S. News and World Report, and by the way, yesterday Pam had 44 on there, so I'm happy to have corrected that before our friends from Northeastern brought it up to us. But it's a large institution that's been growing rapidly globally, and it's renowned for its global leadership in cooperative education. So it is an extremely complex institution, and I can tell all of you from the higher ed world that are joining us today that I had limited background in higher ed and was, as a consultant, a business consultant for 25 years and working in data advisory services, was amazed to discover the complexity of Northeastern, and I'm sure many of you, particularly in some of the larger institutions, are dealing with that same level of complexity, and it is a huge challenge. And I want to say also that my hat goes off to all of you right now that are dealing with the changes that the universities are undergoing because of COVID-19. I myself have a school age, a junior in college, and I truly appreciate all that you are going through. I've been following it very closely, as well as talking to our friends at Northeastern. I think you're all putting in heroic efforts, and I wish you all the greatest success. So let's talk a little bit about the case study then for Northeastern. So it was all born out of Northeastern President's Joseph Aoun's, I hope I pronounce his name properly, 2025 vision, which you see listed there, from structured degree programs built around a catalog of courses to flexible lifelong learning built around a network of experiences. It's a large, a very large and detailed mission that he was able to espouse for the university. This is trying to capture it in a very short phrase. But ultimately, from an operational perspective, what this means, it's multifaceted, but what it means is what you see next. This expands learners from the traditional kind of 4-year semester-based on-prem degree-earning undergrads. And of course, Northeastern is a graduate as well as an undergraduate institution. But in general terms, if that's the mainstream of who learners were, or who customers were for the university community, it's dramatically changing who those learners are, from that 4-year semester-based version to lifelong on-demand learners, doing so remotely, looking at short lessons instead of semester-length education, earning certificates perhaps for those smaller pieces of education, but of course with those having degree optionality ultimately. So this was really a massive vision and a massive change to capture more, if you will, the way we think about it in business terms, is share of wallet of the learning community over their lifetime. So large impact, and says increased complexity to nearly every university function. So every part of the university was impacted by the program to achieve this vision and to undergo that fundamental change that I listed above. But for Northeastern, this was critically important that they wanted to, as it says here, maintain the federated structure and entrepreneurial culture that drove innovation, that attracted faculty, and that attracted students to the university. So, Northeastern has a history of that innovation and of that federated and entrepreneurial approach. And it's also founded in the fact that they're the leader in experiential learning or cooperative education. They're working with industry at all times, and as we all know, industry itself is very focused today on innovation and entrepreneurialism. So Northeastern always has been, and what they wanted to do was maintain that. It was very important culturally to maintain it. Then the challenge becomes, how do you grow in complexity, and how do you manage coordination while maintaining that federated structure? And those federated structures come with a set of challenges that we'll talk about. So how would they achieve this? One of the tenets of the strategy was to be a data-empowered organization. So while many activities were going on and continue to go on to achieve this vision, from a data and analytics perspective, they needed to manage the complexity that was being created with improved data and analytics. So that meant to create infrastructure, capabilities, and culture that empower what we call citizen data professionals, right, across the institution. So this is the notion that, of self-service data and analytics, which is very popular today across all industries, but nowhere is it more acute than in higher education, which is changing constantly and is very federated. Again, there are different degrees of federation versus centralization, but which is highly federated, and which, again, from Northeastern's perspective, was one that they wanted to maintain, that federated approach and not create centralization. So, and also to create governance that makes that federated approach successful, compliant, and safe. So these were sort of the key things to focus on for the data and analytics strategy. So I'm going to quickly talk about the road to the roadmap. This was a 4-month engagement that followed an Ironside methodology around what we call the maturity model for data and analytics. And ultimately, this is the process that we went through. We started, as you see on the left-hand side, with maturity and a maturity survey of the analytic community across the university. That went to about 230, went to over actually 400, but received about 230 responses, interviewed over 60 stakeholders, as Pam mentioned yesterday, and that's from every organization across the university, from facilities and public safety to, of course, all the academic areas, registrar's office, every part of the university that you can think of. A few key leaders were identified in each, and that grew eventually to 60 stakeholders. So, and we reviewed architecture and data assets, over 175 data sources. And many of these, of course, were discovered within the different organizations that we were speaking to. So there turned out to be a great deal of information. Not everyone was aware of it. It was siloed, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Ultimately, through those analyses, we developed what we call a catalog of pain points and wish lists. We developed specific use cases in speaking to each of those organizations in terms of how they could better manage their data assets and use data to achieve a valuable end. So Pam talked yesterday about 30 or so that were AI use cases, but others were broader analytic use cases. We did a maturity analysis, which I'll talk about briefly, and of course focused on the next phase architecture, which I'll talk about as well. All of those things led to a set of gaps related to where the university was today versus where it needed to be. Those gaps ultimately became a set of initiatives that you see, 109 initiatives that we had to divide into 19 work streams and put into about a 3-year roadmap. Below the initiatives, you see opportunity matrix, cost versus benefits. I know a question came up yesterday about measuring the benefits of these initiatives. It was a critical part of this to be able to understand what investments would be required over time and what benefits would be reaped by those investments in order to prioritize them, because there are many, many opportunities, and no university, including Northeastern, is in a position to be able to do all of them. That's part of the reason you see in the lower right there, two scenarios, optimal and moderated. So optimal was all the things that might get done. Moderated was how do we try to manage that in a more cost-effective way? That, of course, has been further thrown into disarray, if you will, because of investments required for COVID-19. So it's an ongoing story, but having the cost-benefit analysis of each of those components is critically important. Very good. All right, I'm going to move on in the interest of time. Just quickly, I talked about a maturity model. You know, our experience at Ironside is that you need a holistic approach to your data strategy, because if you're not covering all of the pieces, then some of the pieces that are not being covered are doomed to undermine the others. Those are the six, what we call our 6 pillars of data maturity. And beneath these are 26 subcategories around which we are able to evaluate the current and future state of our clients. So one of the first things we did, and this is very important, particularly with respect to the business case, is you really have to understand the analytic community and the university. And what you see here are 5 different personas that we use to model what roles individuals take on in analytics. And here you can see a mix that we developed of what those were. I won't go into them in detail, but what's important is to understand who will be impacted by some of the changes in the initiatives that you're creating on the roadmap, and using those numbers, frankly, to apply costs and determine, you know, where new investments are made, where investments will be saved based on improved productivity for analytic resources, and where analytic resources just need to be added and distributed. So this is very quick. I'm not going to go into this detail. This simply indicates that for each of these levels of the maturity model, each of the pillars within the sub-pillars, we're able to identify what the current state is, what the future state is, and therefore identify the gaps. So you see here on the left in the pink squares what current state is, and in the red surrounded squares you see what the future objective was. One thing I will point out is that it is not the case that in every one of the 26 sub-pillars of a maturity model and data analytics that any institution needs to become a 5. In fact, the key is to make sure that you're matching what strategy is needed with what capabilities are needed below that. So I'm just going to click through this very quickly. This is one attempt to summarize the strategic shifts that were desired, and I'm just going to talk about a few of them. You see on the left-hand side our 6 pillars, and what you see captured in one picture here is the from to, the current to the target state that we wanted to achieve for Northeastern wanted to achieve. And the ones I'll talk about are I've highlighted here in red in the interest of time, but because I think they're probably common to any kind of federated institution, and certainly to universities and complex universities in particular. So around analytics, what you see highlighted there is that the current state included tribal knowledge, and it was very resource intensive. So again, we talked to many organizations within the university, all of whom were struggling or working hard, if not struggling, with analytics related to their areas. Again, from public safety, you know, to the registrar's office, to institutional research, Rana's organization. And there was a constant struggle to try to determine what information was available across the university. And there was also a constant theme that everyone believed if they had access to other information in other parts of the university, that they could improve the value of their own analytics, right? So big issue there associated with tribal knowledge, but a very common one, not just in higher education, across all industry. And that in turn made things very resource intensive, because doing analytics in an environment where you've got to search all over a large institution to find information is very resource intensive, as well as having many other implications. So that we wanted to turn that into analytics that was empowered at the edge. So back to self-service and these citizen data professionals, wanted to empower analytics at the edge. All of those analytic personas that we analyzed earlier, we want to enable them out where business decisions are made within the organizations. We want to enable them with the right set of tools to be able to do that, And as Pam described yesterday, we wanted to try to advance predictive and prescriptive analytics where possible to really improve the value of the analytics they were able to do. From a data perspective, you see siloed and opaque, right? Again, 175 different data assets we discovered that were not, many were associated with the core systems, but many were specific to individual organizations. Around governance, it was mature in pockets. Northeastern, being federated, had done an exceptional job at creating management bodies across the university, built literally over the course of a decade to create a cooperative community between the analytic research community itself, as well as the IT community. So governance was done extremely well there. It was very mature, again, in pockets, but you see in the two-state, and this is true generally of governance, want to make it embraced as core. One of the issues that they have, and that I think is also common, particularly in universities, with all of those different data assets across the university, the question, one of the key governance questions is about ownership of that data, right? All university information is very sensitive from a privacy and security perspective, and yet there was a challenge associated with knowing not just where it was, but could I have access to that? Well, you want governance to manage that process, so you want governance to be embraced as core to these citizen data professionals who know that they're looking at governed data, and therefore it's okay to use and it's of good quality. Ultimately creating what you see there is inclusive and trusted governance. Architecture we'll talk more about. I won't go into it in detail given the time. So we created what we call a demand portfolio, which is basically a massive spreadsheet of these pain points and use cases, which came from the details of the architecture reviews and interviews that we had done across the university. I wanted to include this one because this is core, I would think, to any university today, and it was certainly true for Northeastern. This was the idea, one of many use cases was associated with creating master data around important entities to the university. So here you see just a simple example of a student and wanting to know a 360-degree view of the student. So having student master data management and defining the golden record of the student. But if you look in the lower right-hand side, you know, this is a theme that for students, student data that is universal across the university, not surprisingly. Enrollment, student advisory, public safety, facilities, all of these organizations were interested in having access to the golden record of the student. Otherwise, there were student data across the university in different components focused on different things. So clearly master data was critically important around student, but a series of initiatives that we created were then to expand that to other golden records, other golden entities for master data, such as faculty members. And importantly, by the way, including even facilities related components, but most importantly, and perhaps to Northeastern in its future, was that industrial partners, companies that that work with the university to conduct co-ops, to hire those students, and then who may actually engage Northeastern for that lifelong learning themselves and become a customer to Northeastern. It was an important entity because so many parts of the university were in contact with those business partners that Northeastern has many of. And again, many other uses, as you would imagine, for this information, by the way, including, as you see, advancement there, looking for the golden record of an alumni as well, who might become a donor. So many, many applications. Why a modern data platform? So in order to create that federated an entrepreneurial culture, but allow those assets at the edge of the university to be productive, it was necessary to put a modern data platform in place, which I'll talk about very briefly. This was simply, I won't go into this in detail, you'll get it as you get the follow-up copy of this deck after the presentation. But if you look at the very bottom, what you see is that there is a massive productivity opportunity if you put the right tools in place for those assets that are located out in the business domains in the university. So as you can see in this range, with a modern data platform and self-service, it's about, we estimated in some cases, about a 30 times saving in productivity. So what is a modern data platform? Very quickly, this is a very idealistic view of it, but what you see, a few important components here is you have a set of source systems in the lower left, many of which I've blacked out here, but they feed a master data hub, again, so you can begin to look at your golden records for various important entities across the university. You then maintain a data lake that has various zones, including within it a data warehouse that is your highly governed reporting model. I won't go into the details of the other components, you can see them there, but ultimately you see on the right-hand side a data catalog. This became an incredibly important component of the initial phases based on the discussion we had about siloed data assets across the university. So this is a very important project on the roadmap. And across the top, you see a set of different types of tools that would be available to create the capabilities that you see on the right-hand side. That global data search and understanding, again, self-service focus for data prep and provisioning. That includes data wrangling and data catalogs. Data exploration, dashboarding, and reporting, data that requires data visualization tools, and ultimately automated machine learning and AI, as we talked a bit more about yesterday with Pam Askar. So ultimately, this created 109 initiatives, 32 are what we called foundational, that was really building the core. 71 were specific applications that came out of each of those different organizations, some of which included those AI applications, and 7 what we call anchor applications, which were those that could make the use of the foundational activities as quickly as possible and drive value from them. So here, this is the foundational ones. If you look at this, you'll probably see things that you would recognize as a need in your own environment. I wanted to talk a little bit about the ones in red, the modern data platform. Well, first, the different categories. Of these 32 initiatives, of the 109, you can see there were 4 main streams to think about. Putting leadership and structure in place, the modern data platform, working with those empowered citizen data professionals to improve their workforce effectiveness, and ultimately governance, as we've talked about many times. And there you see within the modern data platform, the data catalog, enterprise data wrangling tools, master data management tools for all of the personas like students, and you see corporate and locations, etc. You see automated machine learning, and of course, creating the actual electronic cloud data warehouse itself as a major initiative. I'm going to hurry along. That was the last one. Great. So that was a selection of activities within the strategy that was developed. What I did not depict, for obvious reasons, was the information related to the business cases that resulted. But I want to reiterate that for each of those initiatives, both investments and benefits were articulated, whether those related to investments in software or hardware on the investment side, or investment in people, and whether the benefit was related to, in fact, the reduction of people or improvement productivity for those analytical resources. All of those were incorporated for each individual initiative. So with that, I'm going to stop, ask for questions. Rana, I hope you're still with us. I know I flew through a lot of material there, but I guess the first thing I would ask, Rana, is do you have any commentary that you'd like to make, given that that fire hose presentation in general? And if not, we can take questions.
You know, the one thing I would say about the whole process was I was, first of all, very happy to work with Ironside. You guys did a great job on the project. But when we went out and did those interviews, it was really impressive to see the creativity which people at the university applied to data. The use cases that you showed on an early slide, they were things that, even though I work with data on a daily basis, I never would have thought of. The chief of police, for example, you know, just you wouldn't think of the police as data people, but the things that they thought of, the things that the facilities people thought of. I was really gratified that they put their thinking caps on when they sat down with Ironside and gave us some really interesting examples of what they would do with data if they had the right tools and the data in the right place. So it's very worthwhile. That's a great way to engage the campus. And I hope to be able to do that again in the future to refresh those use cases at some point.
Great, thank you, Rana. With that, Debbie, are there any questions that we have that have come in.
There was a clarification that was requested, and this, Rana, you might want to comment on. Who needs to be involved and at what stage for this to be successful?
I guess I could, well, I want to turn on my webcam so I'm not like this disembodied voice. I guess I would say that it was very helpful, and it always is, to get a lot of people involved around campus. Campuses tend not to be very top-down places, and so the more you can get that grassroots involved, the more likely you are to get success. So as Paul talked about early in the presentation, we did send a survey to everyone who's involved in data in some way. So people who are the recipients of our business intelligence reports, people who use our Tableau installation. So we cast a pretty wide net because that helped us to, number one, make people aware of this project that we were doing to create an analytics roadmap. And then the sit-down interviews also helped people to get engaged and create awareness. We had a kickoff meeting with lots of stakeholders. I'm sure Paul will remember that. There might have been 40 or 50 people in the room, maybe not quite that. Status meetings along the way, and then a final meeting at the end to show people what had happened. So, so to have a lot of people involved, I think that really helped us when we came back at the end and said, okay, this is our roadmap, we're going to need money. And to have had stakeholders involved all along the way meant that we didn't have to just come out of nowhere and say, yeah, now we have this great roadmap, can you give us funding for it? They were all informed every step of the way. Does that answer the question?
It more than answered the question. It was terrific. Thank you so much. And I'm really glad you shared your webcam. I usually ask folks to do that. That's perfect. We don't have any other questions that I see, but if there's any closing statements that you'd like to make, that would be great.
Paul, did you have anything you wanted to
I just Rana wanted to thank you for joining us today, and your team and some of your colleagues who I think are on as well, for all the incredible work that you did. This was not something that Ironside does in a vacuum, as Rana was just mentioning about all the stakeholders that were involved. We believe, as a matter of philosophy, that you have to be stakeholder driven for these kinds of efforts to be successful, and for those stakeholders to take ownership of the results. So appreciate all the work that you all did.
You're quite welcome.
Terrific. Thanks, and thank you everyone for joining us for today's Take 30.
All right. Thank you all. We appreciate your attending.